All right, Unit 8, Formative 2, Video 3, Quadratic Formula. Okay, so this is a huge formula. You don't have to memorize it. It will be given to you. But you do know how to use it. So this is the formula. All right, and the form that we use is the same, where we have our A term, our B term, and our C term. So we're going to use those numbers like we did when we factored. Okay. So a couple things. It's a little easier. So we have x equals negative b. So this a negative b, it doesn't mean that the number is going to be negative. It's the opposite of b. And then plus or minus, that comes in with the square roots. Okay, remember when we did the square root method, whenever we take the square root of something, we always have our plus or minus. Okay, when we have our square root, we have b squared. So whatever b is, we're going to square it. Now remember, whenever you square something, it's always positive. Minus 4 times the a term, c term, all over 2 times the a term. Okay. All right, so here's our problem. Now we can factor. Sometimes factoring doesn't work. And this is where we use the quadratic formula. So the first thing we're going to do is find out what a, b, and c equal. Okay, so remember your a term is 5, right? It's always there. Your b term here is negative 10, and my c term is negative 18. Okay, so now I'm going to use my formula, and I'm going to plug in the numbers where they go. So this is a substitution. I'm not going to say simple because there's a lot of it to it, but this is a substitution problem. So we have x equals, okay, now negative b means the opposite of b. So the opposite of 10 is a positive 10. Then I have my plus or minus square root. We got a big square root here. B squared, so negative 10 squared, I'm just going to go ahead and put is 100. Now know that this will always be positive, okay, because whenever we square something, it's always going to be a positive. So make sure this number is always a positive number. Minus 4 times the a term, which is 5, times the c term, which is negative 18. And that is all over 2 times the a term. Okay. All right, so all I did was substitute the numbers in. Okay. Now, in order of operations, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Okay, what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that we do what's under the square root first. Okay, so I'm going to put this whole thing in my calculator, not the square root, what's under it. Okay, so I'm going to have x equals 10 plus or minus. Now when I put 100 minus 4 times 5 times negative 18 in the calculator, I get 460. Divided by 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, so that's what I have right now. Okay. Now, this number here is called a discriminant. Okay, it's called a discriminant. It tells us how many solutions there are. That number has to be positive, okay? If it's a negative, it's a no solution, so it has to be positive, okay? It is positive, so I'm going to continue on to my two problems. Okay, so the rest of it we're going to go ahead and put in a calculator. Okay, so we have two answers. So what I'm going to put in the calculator the first time is 10 plus the square root of 460. Okay. Then I'm going to hit my equal sign, then divide by 10. Okay. And I'm going to get 3.14. So that's one solution. Okay. Now for my second solution, I'm going to do the minus. So 10 minus the square root of 460, put in an equal sign, then divide by 10, okay? If you don't hit that equal sign before you divide, every single answer will be wrong. And I'm going to get negative 1.14. And those are my two answers. All right, next one. Okay, same thing. We're going to use a quadratic formula. Now this one, we need to move the 16 over because it always has to be equal to 0, just like in the past. So when I move my 16 over, it becomes negative 16. Okay. Now again, we're going to find out what A, B, and C equals. So A is 7, B is 3, and C is negative 16. Okay, that's your first step. Now we're going to use our formula over here. Okay, and we're going to plug in the problems. So I have x equals, now the opposite of 3 is negative 3, plus or minus big square root here. Okay, now remember we have b squared. Okay, so that's going to be 3 squared, which is 9, minus 4 times the a value times the c value, all over 2 times the a value. Okay. All right. So again, substitution. Again, remember this term right here, the b squared, will never be negative. Okay. This will always be positive. Okay. All right. Now I'm in my calculator. I am going to put what's under the square root in the calculator. Okay. Not the square root. What's under it. So I have x equals negative 3 plus or minus, and when I take the square root of that, I get 457 all over 2a, which is 14. Okay. That was a little long, but that's okay. Okay. All right, so now that was my first step. Now again, this is positive. So I know I have 2 solutions. If it's negative, double check your work, and then it's a no solution. Okay, it doesn't happen that often, but there you go. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and do my 2 problems in the calculator. So I have x equals negative 3 plus the square root of 457 over 14. Okay, now again, remember you're going to hit the equal and then the divided sign. Okay, and then I get 1.31. Okay, so that's one answer. Now my calculator, I'm going to put x equals negative 3 minus the square root of 457 equals, and then divide by 14, and I get negative 1.74. And those are my 2 answers. Okay. Again, we're going to do some more. I know that's a lot, but just think of it, substitution problem. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about the discriminant. Okay, so this is the discriminant. If you notice, it's coming from the square root, what's under the square root. Okay, that's called the discriminant. This tells us how many solutions. How many solutions we have. Okay, so if it's positive, we have 2 solutions. If it's negative, we have no solutions. And if it's a 0, we have 1 solution. Okay, so all we're going to do is take the b squared minus 4ac, but we still need to know a is 3, b is negative 2, and c is 4. Okay, so now I'm just going to use this little piece of it. So b squared, so again, b squared, remember that's negative 2 squared. Is that ever going to be positive? No, so that's 4. Okay, minus 4 times the a value times the c value. Okay, and so when I do that in the calculator, I get negative 44, which puts me at a negative, so this is a no solution. Okay, if this is happening a lot, double check your work because it is not normal to have a lot of these. All right, next one. So again, we're just starting with the discriminant. So we have a equals 4, b equals 5, and c equals negative 84. Okay, so b squared is 25 minus 4 times a times c, okay, which gives us 1,364. So it's positive, which means we have 2 solutions to our answers. Okay. All right, and that's the quadratic formula.